Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. 6,000 people missing, 1,400 dead bodies found riddled with bullets and drilled with holes. More than 10 million people denied their basic rights and the wealth of their land. This is the story of Balochistan. It has been off the world's radar for several decades, but today we could be witnessing that one historic event that could change everything. For 18 days now, thousands of people have been protesting in Gwadar in Balochistan. They're fighting against not just the oppression of their own state, but also a colonizer in China. China has established its colonies in Gwadar. It is now making plans to use the Gwadar port as a military base. Can this protest rein in China's expansionism? And will the protest in Gwadar trigger a bigger movement for Balochistan's rights and independence? On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you about this uprising in Gwadar. Also on the show, will India regulate and tax gaming? The subject was debated in Parliament. We'll tell you how big the market is in India and what does the rest of the world do. Men's professional tennis body ATP refuses to censure China over Peng Shuai, a day after the Women's Tennis Association cancelled all tournaments in China. South Africa is entering the Omicron wave. More than 30 countries have detected cases, but no spike in deaths. Is it the vaccines? Or is the variant not as dangerous as initially feared? And China has entered the Ethiopian conflict officially. Foreign Minister Wang Yi lands in Addis Ababa, backs Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and then preaches non-interference to the world. We'll discuss that. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Russia should not threaten anyone with nightmares.
Ukraine rejects any effort to get it to abandon plans to join NATO, along with any guarantee sought by Russia to defuse tensions on the border. This after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called on U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to provide guarantees that NATO will stay away from Russia's borders. The police in New York City arrested a man who was holding a shotgun outside the United Nations headquarters in Manhattan. The man had threatened to kill himself and was arrested after a tense standoff in which roads around the building were cordoned off. The United Arab Emirates has ordered 80 Rafale fighter jets and 12 military helicopters in a move seen as bolstering economic and political ties with France through an arms contract worth more than $19 billion. The deal was announced as French President Macron began a two-day trip to the Gulf. Austrian Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says he will step down less than 2 months since taking office. This hours after his predecessor Sebastian Kurz announced that he would be withdrawing from politics. Kurz faces breach of trust, corruption and bribery charges. Sri Lanka suffers a massive power outage across large parts of the island. The blackout occurred 2 days after engineers at a state-run electricity board began a protest over the government's plan to sell a 40% stake in a power plant to a firm from the United States. Saif al-Islam, the son of Libya's longtime ruler, gets a go-ahead to run in the nation's presidential election. This after being disqualified earlier for what authorities said were war crimes committed during the revolt against his father, Muammar Gaddafi, more than a decade ago. Ride-hailing giant Didi Global plans to withdraw from the New York Stock Exchange and pursue a Hong Kong listing. This after facing a crackdown from Chinese regulators angered by its US IPO. Experts say that the move will likely discourage Chinese firms from listing in the US. 2 astronauts completed a 6.5-hour spacewalk to replace a faulty antenna on the International Space Station. NASA had earlier said that this mission carried a slightly higher risk posed by orbital debris from a Russian missile test weeks ago. Cristiano Ronaldo scored the 800th goal from his career as Manchester United rallied from behind to beat Arsenal 3-2. The 34-year-old struck twice in the second half of a thrilling contest to see victory for the Red Devils at Old Trafford. According to some estimates, Ronaldo might be the first player in history to score 800 goals for club and country in official matches. Yorkshire County Cricket Club have announced the departures of 16 staff members amid the Azim Rafiq racism scandal. They include longtime director of cricket Martin Moxon, head coach Andrew Gale, and the entire coaching staff. The club's new chair Lord Patel said that significant change was needed to regain trust and rebuild following Rafiq's accusations of institutional racism.
A disgruntled population, a repressive state, and a foreign power trying to establish a colony. These circumstances are the perfect recipe for a civil war anywhere in the world. All you need is a spark, an uprising of some kind. Something that challenges the political masters. And that's exactly what is happening in Balochistan today. 18 days ago, the people of Gwadar began a protest, a campaign called Gwadar Ko Hak Do, or Give Gwadar Its Rights. The protest has shaken Islamabad, so much so that the government of Pakistan has dispatched more than 5,000 policemen to Gwadar, 5,500 according to one account. This is turning into an uprising. Thousands of protesters have joined the campaign in the last 18 days. The crowds are getting bigger. They're fighting back against the oppression of the Pakistani state, also against China's attempts to take over their land. The world still doesn't care about Balochistan, but it cannot afford to ignore this protest. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you why. We'll begin with the latest. Today is the 18th day of the protest. And with each passing day, this campaign is getting bigger. Earlier this week, these protesters blocked the Makran Coastal Highway. This is a critical road link to Gwadar. It connects the region with Karachi and other parts of Pakistan. The protesters put up barricades, big boulders and hurdles. All kinds of vehicular traffic was suspended. On Thursday, local businesses downed their shutters in protest. All shops, business centers, markets and banks remained closed in Gwadar. The protesters have put up a list of 19 demands. What are these demands? Listen to this. What are the protesters demanding? Jobs, clean water, electricity, hospitals, schools. The people of Gwadar are demanding the absolute basics from their government. What all humans need to survive in this day and age. And the state of Pakistan has denied them all of this. And here's something you must know. Balochistan is rich in natural resources, very rich in fact. They could be worth close to $1 trillion according to some estimates, $1 trillion. But the people of Balochistan are denied these riches and resources. They do not benefit from the wealth of their land. Islamabad is squeezing all this wealth and pushing the Baloch into poverty. Those who dare to speak out are kidnapped, tortured, murdered. According to human rights groups, at least 6,000 people are missing in Balochistan. Since 2009, 1,400 people have been found dead. Their bodies were riddled with bullets and drilled with holes. You can imagine what happened to them. The people of Balochistan have been the victims of the military's forced disappearances. So this campaign, the one in Gwadar, is a pushback. The people are fighting back. How is the government responding? With force, as it always does. Islamabad has sent the police. 5,500 cops have been deployed to Gwadar. To do what? They're calling it anti-riot duty. Pakistan's policies have resulted in this. Also, the free run it has given China in Gwadar. China, is turning Gwadar into its colony. It is building a massive port here. the centerpiece of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. China is also establishing a permanent settlement here. China is pouring in money, it is building infrastructure, but none of it for the people of Gwadar. They don't even get jobs. The Chinese projects in Gwadar are being built by Chinese workers. Modern housing settlements have come up, exclusively reserved for the Chinese. Reports say not even members of the Balochistan Assembly are allowed to enter here. So China is stealing from the people of Gwadar. Chinese trawlers are carrying out large-scale fishing off the coast of Balochistan. Local fishermen are losing their livelihood here. The Chinese trawlers, you see, use machines to catch fish. The locals cannot compete with that, so they lose out. And their government does not help, the government of Pakistan. It has legitimized China's fishing operations. It has given the Chinese licenses. So the local fishermen in Gwadar have no other option but to protest. At least 1,000 fishermen are part of this campaign. They say the local officials are corrupt and they're working for Chinese trawlers. How does Beijing respond to all of this? By denial. China says there is no backlash in Balochistan, there is no protest in Gwadar, and that this is all fake news.
This is completely a fake news. Certain media's hyping up of the protests against China in Gwadar region lacks factual basis. I want to reiterate that the Gwadar port, as a leading project of CPEC, has been focusing on the development and people's livelihood.
China does not want the world to pay attention to this protest because it is not just stealing livelihoods and colonizing Gwadar, it is also planning to militarize it. China wants to send its army to Gwadar. Their new port won't just be a transport hub, it will serve as a base for the Chinese naval forces. The PLA is planning an expansion. Right now, 20,000 troops serve in the PLA's Marine Corps. China wants to expand this to 100,000 personnel. From 20,000 to 100,000 troops. It's a 400% increase. The number of brigades will go up from 2 to 10. 2 to 10. And where will these additional troops go? The PLA wants to station them overseas. They will be deployed at Chinese ports in Djibouti and Gwadar. How do you think the Chinese military presence in Gwadar will play out? The writing is on the wall. Public anger is swelling. Separatists are gaining ground. Chinese projects and citizens are under attack here. Once the Chinese Navy sets foot in Gwadar, a retaliation is certain. And that could mark the beginning of a civil war in Gwadar, in Balochistan. Not to mention a security nightmare for the region. And what's happening in Gwadar is just one of the many challenges that the Prime Minister of Pakistan faces, Imran Khan. The other big challenge is the country's economy. It's sinking, to say the least. Imran Khan has confessed that he does not have money to run his country. He said it on record. We played that story for you. But what we did not know is that he doesn't have enough money to pay salaries as well. This afternoon, the Pakistani embassy in Serbia released a statement on its official Twitter handle slamming the government for failing to pay salaries on time. What followed was a comedy of errors. Here's a report.
आपने सबसे पहले घबराना नहीं है, घबराना नहीं, घबराना नहीं, घबराना नहीं, घबराना नहीं। साबुन महंगा हो जाए तो आपने लगाना नहीं, आपने घबराना नहीं।
What you just saw may be a parody video, but it reveals the state of affairs in Pakistan, where prices are shooting up at lightning speed, and the economy is falling faster than the wink of an eye. This video is just a satirical depiction of that reality. But what makes it even funnier is that it was shared by an official Pakistani Twitter handle, a handle run by the Pakistani embassy in Serbia. It shared this video along with an appeal that read, with inflation breaking all previous records, how long do you expect, Imran Khan, that we government officials will remain silent and keep working for you? Without being paid for 3 months and our children being forced out of school due to non-payment of fees. Is this Naya Pakistan? To call it an embarrassment would be an understatement. It was a brutal joke on a public platform. Who was behind it? Going by the tone of the tweet, it was most likely a disgruntled embassy official. Islamabad, however, denies this. It says the Twitter account was hacked. Some Pakistani experts have gone as far as to hint at a conspiracy between Indian hackers and the new Twitter CEO, Parag Agrawal. There's no end to imagination, and while it's good to be imaginative, it's important to not lose sight of reality. The reality, in this case, is Pakistani embassies are indeed facing a cash crunch. They're struggling to pay employees their salaries on time. Look at this letter. It apparently belongs to the Pakistani High Commission in Dhaka. The letter is addressed to the Pakistani government. It seeks the allocation of immediate funds so that embassy officials can pay the school fee of their children. The authenticity of this letter cannot be confirmed, but here's a little reason to doubt it. When Prime Minister Imran Khan has himself gone on record to state that he doesn't have enough money to run Pakistan.
हमारा सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम यह है कि हमारे पास इतना पैसा नहीं है अपने मुल्क को चलाने के लिए और जिसकी वजह से मैं कर्जे ले रहा हूं.
It's a sad state of affairs. Pakistan's cash reserves are shrinking. The currency is losing its value. Trade deficit is at a record low. Inflation is the fastest in Asia, and the stock market is among the worst globally. To make things worse, the IMF is not helping. It has set terms and conditions for Pakistan before it can seek the next loan dispersal. At a time like this, Imran should be busy chalking out strategies, plans to prevent Pakistan from an economic catastrophe. Instead, he is busy putting out these cryptic quotes on why one should study the past to correct mistakes in the present. It's a good quote. Here's another one. Practice what you preach. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Do you remember a time when games were a pastime? From studying or some downtime with family, if you played games if you had spare time. It was like a luxury. Well, not anymore. Today, games are a full-time job, a 24/7 obsession, a means to earn money, which makes you wonder who is controlling it. The Indian Parliament debated that today. Should online games be taxed more? Should they be regulated? The BJP's lawmaker Sushil Modi says yes, they should be. His arguments may sound familiar to you. Kids are getting addicted, he said. Are these games about skill or just gambling? And why is the country missing out on such a big tax source? The government of India has taken note of this suggestion. Taxation was always on their mind, we are told, but regulation is a new proposition. So things are very much in the brainstorming stage. Nevertheless, these are valid questions, and we'll try to answer some of them tonight. Starting with how big this industry is in India. In 2016, online was worth $543 million. In 2020, $1 billion. This industry is growing at around 18% a year, and at this rate, it could be worth $2 billion by 2023. And it's not just the money. There were 360 million online gamers in India last year. By 2022, there could be 510 million. So there's money, there's interest, but there is no regulation. Does this mean the gaming industry does not pay taxes? Well, not quite. Online games raise money in three ways. Number one, through a registration fee. You pay this to enter the game, and this registration fee is taxable. Number two, through a prize money pool. Every player adds money to this pool, and as they say, the winners take it all. Now, this pool money is not taxed by the government. Number three is marketing revenue. The annoying ads that you see while playing games, well, money from those ads is also taxable. So yes, there is tax. So what's the issue here? Reports say the government is considering a single tax rate for online gaming. Right now, there are two rates, 18% based games and 28% for games of chance, like online poker or Ludo. And this distinction of skill versus chance can be complicated. Every online game wants to be called skill-based. But what's skilled about throwing a dice or randomly pressing buttons? The fact is, some online games are purely based on luck. I'm not saying that's always the case. There are skill-based games too, like FIFA or Counter-Strike. But if there's a single tax rate, there would be no distinction. Tax on Ludo would be the same as tax on FIFA, and gaming companies do not like this. They believe the government will impose a higher tax rate, which is 28%, and they will end up losing money. So the skill versus luck debate is never ending. Take Rummy, for instance. The players will tell you it's all about skill, playing Rummy, about strategies and money power. But we all know it depends on the cards you get. And that is a matter of pure luck. Multiple state governments in India have tried to ban online gaming in the past. And they made the same argument. It's luck, not skill, they said. But the courts repeatedly struck down those bans. So if banning is not an option, can online gaming be regulated? The pandemic has made this a pressing question. Our kids are spending more time on smartphones. They're downloading new games, playing with people from halfway across the world. Who is regulating all of this? You see, in a casino, you can see people coming in, kids coming in. You can keep them out. But how do you do that in the virtual world? There are many approaches to choose from. The West, for instance, has a laissez-faire approach. Online gambling is legal. You can play as much as you want. This is the case in the United States, in most US states, in fact. In some provinces of Canada, in parts of the European Union and the Caribbean, online gaming is a thriving industry in these places. Then you have China, the other extreme. The Communist Party of China will tell you when to play, when not to play, and what to play. Chinese kids can play for 1 hour, and that too on Fridays, weekends, and public holidays. That's it. Ideally, we're looking for a middle ground in India. For instance, tightening the registration process, gaming apps must start demanding proof of age, and I'm not talking about the typical "how old are you" question. I'm talking about proper legal proof. They should demand that. We should also have parental control on apps. For example, when your child is playing, in-app purchases should not be popping up. Now, these are some basic ways to regulate online gaming. At the same time, we must not stifle the industry. Remember, online gaming is a golden goose. It employs thousands of people, pays millions in taxes, and not to mention, it is being raised as mainstream sport. The 2022 Asian Games will feature e-sport events. The Olympic Committee has already sanctioned an e-sport Olympics. So this industry is not going anywhere. The question is, how do you harness it? Stricter controls on gambling games is a must. And as for kids always being on the phone, there's only one advice that we have for you. Remember, who is the parent? Now, it's been over 30 days, and we still don't have the whereabouts of Peng Shuai, China's most famous tennis star. As you all know, she's missing. She's been missing for some time now, a month to be precise. Peng Shuai had accused a Chinese official of sexual assault. The next thing you know, Peng Shuai was nowhere to be seen. She disappeared. China is punishing Peng Shuai for speaking out. This woman is a 3-time Olympian. She is one of the biggest stars in the global tennis fraternity. For many, Peng Shuai is the face of tennis in China, and now Peng Shuai is missing in China. And guess what? The Men's Tennis Association, ATP, could not care less. That's what it's called, ATP, Association of Tennis Professionals. ATP says it will monitor developments. Monitor what developments exactly? It's not like China is giving the world a daily bulletin on Peng Shuai. China is in fact denying that Peng Shuai is missing. It is sending fake mails to tennis bodies. It is circulating videos that convince no one. It is scrubbing all news about Peng Shuai from Chinese social media and the internet. China is trying to bury the scandal. So there's surely more the ATP can do than issue lame statements. Just listen to this one, how ridiculous it sounds. This is what they've said. The situation involving Peng Shuai continues to raise serious concerns within and beyond our sport. We know that sport can have a positive influence on society and generally believe that having a global presence gives us the best chance of creating opportunity and making an impact. Well then, make an impact. Do what the Women's Tennis Association has done. Pull out of China, suspend all matches, and use your leverage over China. ATP is a body that organized at least 4 events in China in 2019. One of these events, called the Shanghai Masters 1000, had a prize money of $14 million. In 2018, the same event had a prize money of $9.2 million. This is a lot of money. And this is the kind of business the ATP does with China. This is also the kind of leverage the ATP has over China. So instead of making quote-unquote or quote-unquote monitoring developments, as they said, this body can monetarily put pressure on China. And now that would be real impact, because statements like these are just a waste of time. Why even put them out? Actually, I would like to answer that one. The ATP, you see, is in a tough right now. It is being mocked by tennis stars for not doing enough, for not standing up like the WTA, for not suspending matches in China. The WTA has set a precedent for sporting bodies by putting $1 billion deal at stake, by putting Peng Shuai over profit. And for that, we want to applaud the WTA. We also want to hold up a mirror to the ATP and the OIC, the IOC, the International Olympics Committee. The body says, once an Olympian, always an Olympian. It claims Olympians are a family. But it also sees nothing wrong in conducting Winter Olympics in Beijing after it has made an Olympian disappear. Well, here's what the IOC says. There are different ways to achieve her well-being and safety. We have taken a very human and person-centered approach to her situation. We are using quiet diplomacy. You know what's human? Standing up for one of your own. China has a $700 billion sporting industry, money plus heft. Also a chance to sports wash its crimes. Hence the Winter Olympics, hence the big-ticket tennis matches. Are sporting bodies blind to this truth? Or are they just bending before Chinese money? China is trying to erase Peng Shuai from society. Speaking about her has become a taboo. Every mention of Peng Shuai has been removed from the internet in China. It is as if she never existed, as if Peng Shuai never existed. While the ATP and the IOC choose to do nothing, Peng's fans in China have decided to speak out. They're asking tough questions online, and since they cannot mention Peng Shuai on social media while being in China, they're referring to her as simply a tennis player. They're referring to her story as the spat. They're using vague, oblique references to Peng Shuai to join the world in asking hashtag, where is Peng Shuai? And for the record, sporting bodies have consistently failed the world. It's not just in China. They let oppressive regimes host major events. They let dictators organize the Olympics. They put money over human rights. I can give you many examples, like Qatar. They're all set to host the 2022 FIFA World Cup. It's a massive honor for any country. In 2018, the FIFA World Cup final was watched by 3.6 billion people. That's around half of the entire world. What has Qatar done to deserve this honor? I have a list. Forced labor of migrant workers, death penalty for same-sex relations and blasphemy, flogging for alcohol consumption, a ban on all political parties, the guardianship system for women, and major restrictions on freedom of expression. This is what Qatar has achieved. This is Qatar's track record. Not much better than North Korea. But you will never see a FIFA World Cup in Pyongyang. Do you know why? Because Qatar has oil. It has money. That's something North Korea does not have. And that's all these sporting bodies seem to care about, minting money. FIFA is expected to make $3 billion from the 2022 World Cup. Qatar is expecting a $20 billion boost. No wonder they're silent, both of them. But the international community cannot afford to be silent. Sport is supposed to be a great unit. It is supposed to uplift people. Instead, it is being sacrificed for an image makeover. Qatar should have never been awarded the World Cup. It should never have been on the short list. So what exactly is FIFA thinking? Apparently, the plan was to take football to new frontiers. No Arab nation has ever hosted the World Cup, so FIFA wanted to break that trend. But at what cost? Reports say Qatar employed a spy to keep tabs on rival bidders. Imagine that. All the talk about sportsmanship, about fair play, and this is how Qatar won the hosting rights, by spying on the other bidders. And this is just one example of sports washing. There are many more, like Saudi Arabia. All that oil money had to go somewhere. Well, it's going to the English Premier League. A Saudi consortium has taken over Newcastle United. The fans are not happy about this, but the government did nothing. Petrodollars can be very appealing, you see. Same thing in Formula One. Earlier this year, there was a Grand Prix in Qatar. This weekend, they're racing in Saudi Arabia. It is the first Formula One race in this kingdom. Even the drivers are not happy about it. This is how Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton described being in Jeddah. He said, "Do I feel comfortable here? I wouldn't say I do, but it's not my choice to be here. The sport has taken the choice to be here." Remember, this is the most successful Formula One driver in history, the most marketable driver on earth. And he is not happy, but the sport doesn't care. So all this talk about putting athletes first is hogwash. When the checkbooks open, athletes take a back seat. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Countries like Qatar and China know their position. They don't have diplomatic credibility. They're not top holiday destinations. So how do they stay in public discourse? By injecting themselves into such events. Take the Winter Olympics in Beijing next year. Most of you may oppose the Chinese regime, but you may love the Winter Games. So what do? Boycott your favorite event or watch a genocidal regime host it. And this confusion is what countries want, this division. Sports washing makes you forget a country's crimes, their human rights abuses. Instead, you see the wonderful opening ceremonies, you see hundreds of athletes enjoying themselves. As viewers, we cannot make a difference here, but the sporting bodies can. So can the sponsors and governments. Look at what the WTA did in China. They sacrificed $1 billion to stand up for one athlete. So it's not impossible. It can be done. It should be done. It's a question of intent. If sports is a function of humanity, then human rights are non-negotiable. Now, some of you may not care very much about the World Cup or tennis or gaming, but here's something I bet everyone would want to know about: Omicron. The single most feared word today, you could say. This Wuhan virus variant has set off alarm bells globally. 10 days ago, only South Africa had reported the variant. Today, more than 30 countries have confirmed cases of Omicron. The list includes the UK, South Africa, Brazil, Australia, Germany, Hong Kong, India, Spain, Canada, the Netherlands. Belgium has reported its first case, as has Austria, also France. This variant is crossing borders very quickly, and here's what we know about it so far. 1, Omicron has an increased risk of reinfection, and 2, Omicron has a higher number of mutations. That's all the World Health Organization has confirmed so far. So before I proceed, I want to remind you to not panic. While you must stay safe and alert, panicking is uncalled for. Countries around the world are doing what they can to contain Omicron. The United States, for example, plans to ask all international passengers to furnish RT-PCR reports irrespective of their vaccination status. The United States is also planning to extend mask requirements on flights, trains and public transport till the 18th of March. In another part of the world, South Korea has made vaccine pass mandatory for those visiting cinemas, restaurants and public spaces. Seoul has also reimposed limits on private gatherings. In Canada, the country's most populous province has lowered the eligibility age for booster shots. Ontario will now give boosters to those who are 50 or above. In India, the Ministry of Health has answered some FAQs. It said that in terms of the precautions, same rules apply as before: masks, vaccination, social distancing, and maintaining good ventilation. This is what you need to do. Now, here's a trend that we have noticed so far. While Omicron is contributing to an exponential rise in cases, there isn't really a significant spike in deaths. Take South Africa, for example. On the 23rd of November, South Africa reported 868 new cases. The next day, over 1,200. 2,500 new cases were reported on the 25th of November, 8,500 cases on the 1st of December, over 11,500 cases on the 2nd of December. The graph, as you can see, is constantly on the rise. Now compare this graph to the one representing daily deaths. On the 23rd of November, South Africa reported 51 deaths. On the 25th of November, 114 deaths. Then 28 deaths on the 1st of December, 44 deaths the next day. As you can see, there is not a clear rise in this graph. Now, while there is a lot of talk about this variant being deadlier than Delta, there is still no scientific evidence to back this claim. While cases are rising steadily, deaths are not. And thank God for that. Does that mean that the Omicron variant is not really all that dangerous? Or does it mean vaccines are breaking the link between infection and death? Well, whatever be the case, numbers so far are working in our favor, except there is one concern, and that's children. Say it's the vaccines that are preventing deaths, or the combination of vaccines and acquired immunity that's protecting us from severe COVID. What happens to those who have not been vaccinated? Our children, for example. Are they more at risk? Most countries still do not have a vaccine for those under 18, meaning more of our infants, toddlers and adolescents are still unprotected against the Wuhan virus and its emerging variants. Does that mean that they are the most at risk right now? Experts have not said anything in this regard, but these are some of the questions that we will have to address as countries like South Africa enter the Omicron wave. And talking about confusion, it doesn't apply only to Omicron. You could say the same about what's happening in Vienna. I'm talking about the Iran nuclear talks. The diplomats are back at the table. They want a deal, but are they willing to make concessions? The Iranians want all sanctions lifted. The Americans say we don't trust your intentions, and the Europeans are in charge of calming the nerves. Here's a report.
This week, talks resumed to revive the Iran nuclear deal. But the United States was not on the table. The new government of Iran still doesn't want to talk directly to the United States. Iran is engaging with America through Europe. And European diplomats don't doubt the intentions of Iran.
I feel extremely positive about what I have seen today in the Joint Commission. Clearly a will to engage.
But the Biden administration has expressed doubts that it still doesn't know if Iran is engaging in good faith. This is the 7th round of talks. US President Joe Biden promised to return to the Iran deal almost a year into office. He hasn't had any success so far, and a breakthrough soon is unlikely.
I have to tell you, recent moves, recent rhetoric don't give us a lot of cause for optimism. But even though the hour is getting very late, it is not too late for Iran to reverse course.
Here is the reason why. The United States doubts Iran. Tehran could be taking steps towards enriching weapons-grade uranium. The International Atomic Energy Agency has been monitoring the situation. They detected some activity at the underground nuclear facility at Fordo and raised an alarm. Iran's rival, Israel, was quick to issue a warning to the West.
Israel is very worried about the readiness to remove the sanctions and to allow a flow of billions of dollars to Iran in exchange for unsatisfactory restrictions in the nuclear realm. This is the message that we are relaying in every manner, whether to the Americans or to other countries negotiating with Iran.
Naftali Bennett wants the West to suspend talks with Iran immediately. The United States and its allies cannot ignore that message because Israel has a history of taking matters into its own hands. Iran's Natanz nuclear facility has been repeatedly attacked in recent years. Turns out, Israel's spy agency, Mossad, was behind it. Israeli sleuths pretended that they worked for international dissident groups. They recruited 10 Iranian scientists to smuggle explosives inside the nuclear plant. The bombs were planted in 2019. Mossad then carried out a series of explosions in 2020 and 2021. The risk of retaliation from Israel hasn't deterred Iran. Its scientists are still enriching uranium. Western diplomats have a small window of opportunity to revive the nuclear deal. If they go slow now, they risk igniting a new conflict in West Asia. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
An oppressive regime is waging a war on its ethnic minority. Who am I talking about? I'll give you two options: China and Ethiopia. Both would be the right answer. Ethiopia has been at war for 10 months. There is political instability. There are ethnic divisions. It was just a matter of time before China swooped in, and that's exactly what they have done. On Wednesday, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Ethiopia. He met the Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. Why not the Prime Minister? Because Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was busy. He's apparently on the front line, leading the troops himself. Must be a first for a Nobel Peace Laureate. Anyway, what was Wang Yi doing in Ethiopia? Making the most of a hopeless situation. That's what China does. Ethiopia was a beacon of stability in the Horn of Africa. The biggest economy, politically reliable, diplomatically savvy. It was also one of America's biggest partners in Africa. In 2008, the US was sending around $1 billion of aid to Ethiopia. But in the last decade, it slowed down. Donald Trump suspended all financial support. And now the civil war is making things worse. Joe Biden is threatening sanctions. He's also withdrawing all non-essential embassy staff. And this is a problem for Abiy Ahmed. He's been fighting a war for 10 months, and wars are expensive. In 2020, Ethiopia's military expenditure was $460 million. This year, more than $400 million already. The Americans are not in financing this war, so who will? Enter China. Beijing has always eyed Ethiopia as an outpost for its Belt and Road project. Perfect opportunity. Foreign Minister Wang Yi turned on the charm offensive in Ethiopia. All the war crimes and massacres could wait. There was a country to colonize.
The comradeship of Ethiopia and China is growing, and China has the desire to further strengthen this relationship. We understand the situation in Ethiopia very well. Ethiopia has the history, acumen, and capacity to solve this problem. We also want the problem to be solved there this way.
And Wang Yi did not stop there. He gave a crash course on Chinese foreign policy. Listen to this. China has the principle of non-interference in internal affairs. We do not meddle in the internal affairs of Ethiopia, and we also oppose any external forces interference in the internal affairs of Ethiopia. We'll talk about double standards. Last we checked, Wang Yi is not an Ethiopian citizen. He is the foreign minister of China, another country. He is visiting Ethiopia. He's siding with the government in a civil war, ignoring war crimes, and then talking about non-interference. The perks of being a Chinese diplomat: you can say one thing and do another, no questions asked. China's designs in Ethiopia were expected. It was their perfect project, a vacuum left by the Americans and a civil war. No way China was just going to stand by. But the worrying part is this: Ethiopia is falling for Beijing's lies. It is eagerly lapping up Chinese money. Let me show you some numbers. By 2018, China had invested $4 billion in Ethiopia. This is all direct investments. And then you have loans. From 2000 to 2019, Ethiopia borrowed $13.7 billion from Chinese lenders. Bilateral trade is around $5.4 billion. All of this money is tied up in Ethiopia. For example, the Eastern Industrial Zone, it is built and occupied by Chinese companies. Another example is the Addis-Djibouti railway line. Chinese companies were contracted to renovate this route. These projects are a major victory for the Chinese. One, they draw Ethiopia away from the West. And two, they gain a powerful partner in Africa, the continent's seventh largest economy and the strategic linchpin of East Africa. For the United States, it is yet another diplomatic failure. Another partner swooped away by the Chinese. It did not start with the Civil War, by the way. It started in the last 2 decades. US presidents have systematically ignored Africa. Their strategy was to throw money at the continent. But who did this money reach? Did the rulers bother to distribute it? Nobody checked. While Washington was ignoring Africa, Beijing was building an empire, and Ethiopia could be its crown jewel. It's a story we'll keep tracking. We'll wrap the show for the moment. Leave you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching and weekend.